Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I am your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Hello, I take no responsibility for the topic tonight.
No worries. Well, we teased a little bit about it last episode. We're going to talk about Jewish cooking. And I've been thinking about it, and it's kind of funny because a lot of Jewish cooking is just the I guess, the type of food in the area that Jews were living in, and they kind of clung to it. But I don't know how necessarily you can say they made it their own. I mean, for instance, borscht, right? Everyone talks about the borscht belt, Jewish borscht, all that stuff. And there is plenty of non-Jewish people that had borscht, that ate borscht. I don't know why it had to be so coinciding with Judaism. Like, why is that considered, I guess, part of Jewish cuisine?
Well, actually, first we really need to make a distinction between, within Judaism, we have, the Ashkenazic and Sephardic and, these even Indian Jews, and the cooking is very, 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 well, in this part of the world, when we talk about Jewish cooking, let's face it, we're talking about the old Ashkenazic Jewish cooking, the gribenas, the kishka, the kugels, the nice stuff that's, high in cholesterol.
Chicken feet, right?
Oh, chicken feet. Oh, well, yeah. The funny thing is, as you know, I love making chicken soup with chicken feet because my mother made chicken soup with chicken feet, and it is so delicious. It's got like a certain nippiness to it and a distinctive smell and flavor that is just, it's very, very sharply chickeny. And I didn't know about this, but evidently Jamaicans are also very big on recipes using chicken feet. And one time we had, when your father, of course, needed help, we had a Jamaican healthcare worker that came here for a while to help him. And she saw me cooking chicken soup with chicken feet. And she looked at me and she says, "Hey, are you part Jamaican?" And she, couldn't get over the fact that no, I was, of this, regular Ashkenazic Jewish background, and that I was using chicken feet. But when people talk about the medicinal values of chicken soup, like, if you have a cold, the old tradition was if you're not feeling well, you got the flu, got a cold. My mother, Jewish mothers years ago would give their families or their, loved ones or anybody who was ill, chicken soup. And this is the chicken soup that they're talking about, the one that's made with chicken feet, because chicken feet, people don't realize, and my mother always used to say, chicken feet are very high in vitamins. And then I found out a few years ago that chicken feet are also very high in hyaluronic acid, which is good for inflammation.
Interesting. See, but then again, it's back to what I was saying beforehand, that a lot of food you'd find culturally Jewish really isn't culturally Jewish. It's not significantly only Jewish. It's other cultures as well that take it. But I would say that certain food, however, is Jewish. I would say matzo ball soup, matzah itself, hamantashen. That's pretty Jewish. I think what makes it Jewish is that it has a strong significance to, like, I would say a holiday or an event. Like jelly donuts aren't necessarily Jewish, but we have sufganiyot on Hanukkah, which makes that like considered Jewish cuisine, Jewish, food, so to speak. But I was exposed to a lot of other different types of Jewish food from, I guess, like my friends that were Moroccan. They had Moroccan fish, and that was considered for them. That was like their very Jewish, food they have on Shabbos. They have the Moroccan fish.
Is Moroccan fish the whole fish? It's made with this hot tomato, like this hot sauce. Hot tomato sauce.
Yeah.
I had that in Israel. I loved it. Yes, it was wonderful. In fact, when I came back from Israel, after eating a whole fish in Israel, the head and everything, it looks so beautiful. I mean, to put a whole fish on the table and, it's either smeared in sauce or there's also smeared in olive oil. That's nice olive oil with seasonal and all sorts of spices. So when I first got married to your father, the first time I cooked for him, I decided to cook him a whole fish. And I put it in front, he almost flipped. He says, I can't eat it. He's "What's this?" I said, "It's a fish. It's a whole fish. It's the way a fish is supposed to look." He says, "I can't eat this. It's staring at me." And he had never had
Oh
a whole
yeah.
fish in his life. And it's like, I guess some people are just very squeamish.
He also
Anything that has a head or something to it, they can't eat.
body parts. I remember you would make the chicken soup with chicken feet, and Tati used to just go nuts. He couldn't take it. He didn't like it. Because it's just, if knowing it comes from a body, there's a thing where like you could have like a second, like I guess a second step away from like a physical body that you're getting sustenance from. It's okay. Like eating beef, that's like, maybe I would say like, the hamburgers, people can take a step away. But if you're eating a cow head, you can't take a step back from that. Well, speaking of cow head, another Jewish cuisine actually is eating fish head or goat head on Rosh Hashanah.
Or lamb's head. I've seen lamb's
Head. That's goat's head,
Yeah.
lamb's head.
Yeah. But I remember a friend of mine told me that she was helping a friend of hers who was, I think, a Boston. She and her husband were Boston Hasidim, and this friend of mine, she was a good friend of hers, and she was single, and she wanted to help this married friend of hers that had a lot of kids. They were of Yom Tov, they were of Rosh Hashanah, to try to help her out in the kitchen a little bit. So the mother of the family she was friends with told her, "Can you check without thinking?" She says to her, "Can you please check the pot to see if the meat is ready?" And my friend said she took the lid off the pot, and there was a whole lamb head staring at her, and she went, "Ah!" She almost hit the ceiling.
I mean, I guess if I wasn't expecting an entire lamb's head under a pot, I might freak out a little bit too, just for a split second. But that's something else I find, I feel like I'm saying interesting too many times. But what I find, I guess, fascinating with Jewish cuisine is, what would be the future of Jewish cuisine? What would you consider like nowadays? It's something so mundane that Jews eat, but because we eat it so frequently and so oftenly for special occasions, we might up making it like our own and doing our own thing. Maybe sushi. Maybe sushi would be like, people would like go ahead, and people already Jews are already doing like their own version of sushi. Literally, I've seen like it's just lox on rice and with seaweed. I've seen that. I've seen that. Or cream cheese. It's cream cheese and lox wrapped up in rice and seaweed. It's just like
cream cheese. You
Yes.
kidding me? Cream
Yes.
cheese. I can go for the lox, and I like seaweed, and I can go for the lox and the rice, but cream cheese.
But also, well, I think in the early 1900s, it was more of like, I guess the bagels and the pastrami and the deli that Jews brought in from,
Well, I'll tell you a couple stories. First of all, when I was Mechon Chana, we had a wonderful lady was our cook. Now, people who are listening, and everyone who's gone away to a Jewish school knows the cook in a Jewish school is not just the cook. The cook in a Jewish school is the social worker and the psychologist and the mother confessor, and basically runs the place. So we had this wonderful lady named Mrs. Galprin, who I think she and her family spent time in a Siberian prison camp.
Wow.
And she made us real borscht. I mean, the borscht that is sold in the stores in the bottles, that's not real borscht. That's just beet juice. Real borscht is a nice vegetable soup with beets and either a chicken stock or a beef stock, and it's delicious.
That doesn't sound that bad. I mean, I don't like borscht because I just don't like beets. It's too earthy for me. I feel like I'm eating dirt.
I feel the same way. Yeah, I've never, I haven't liked beets until very recently. And what got me to like beets was I was working in a daycare center where one of the mothers was from the Ukraine. And she sent these little beets for lunch with her children. And they smelled delicious and the kids loved them. And I decided just to take like one piece to see what it tasted like. And it was so good. I'd never tasted beets like that. So I asked her what she used in her beets. They smelled so good. And I admitted that I tried a little bit, and it was fantastic. And I'm not a big enthusiast, for eating beets. And she told me what she does is she cuts the beets up, or she gets it, already cut from a can, and she puts olive oil and seasonal on it and bakes it in the oven for like 5 minutes.
Oh.
And it takes away, I'll tell you, it tastes so good. It takes away that, like, I know what you mean about that earthy taste of beets. That earthy taste is the main reason why I never liked beets until I was introduced to this recipe.
Yeah. What I also find very interesting is because nowadays it's so significant where there are so many different types of Jews together in major spaces like New York City or Baltimore or Israel, that when you go to the supermarkets, you don't just get, your standard Ashkenazi like Jewish type food. You get a lot of other kinds of like Sephardi and other Middle Eastern, types of cuisine,
Mhm.
like baklava actually is very like prominent in the Middle Eastern Jewish culture. And you also have, we have babka. Babka is freaking awesome. It's
Mhm.
just really thick
Yes,
chocolate
yes.
dessert. Yeah. But
I've got 40 pounds to lose before your wedding.
oh yeah, I'm working on that too. It's a work in progress. I'm trying, but whatever. It
Well,
is what it
I
is.
remember when you said baklava, um, you struck a chord in my memory. I remember when years ago, Baltimore until about the 1980s, Baltimore experimented here and there, on and off, with various types of kosher restaurants. When I was a little girl, there was only one kosher restaurant. It was Ashkenazic, and a lot of people didn't like it. The food was very fatty, very greasy. The regular, the kishka. And in those days, the kishka, by the way, and when I was a little girl, was real kishka with a real cow's intestine, not the paraffin not the paraffin wrapping that they have today. So, but that eventually went out of business. Then I think I was in, college. These Israelis decided to open up an Israeli restaurant, just like the very, very beginnings. This Israeli restaurant was it didn't last too long. It was on Northern Parkway, and around Northern Parkway and Park Heights. It started out as almost like it started out actually, it was a trailer. And I decided to go in and try some of the food. And all I remember is looking up at the menu. The menu was on the wall, and looking up at it, and every 2 minutes asking the guy behind the counter, "What's this? What's that? What's this? What's that?" This was the very, very beginnings of being introduced to falafel and baklava,
Oh,
things like this, and shawarma and all sorts of things like that. This was like totally foreign to anybody. The reason the restaurant didn't succeed, though, was unfortunately the people who owned it and ran it. When they waited on you, acted like they were doing you a favor.
you mean Israelis? They were being Israelis.
Let's not be prejudiced now. I know many Israelis that are very, very kind, nice, wonderful people. So
They're awesome people. I'm not going to deny that, but they're sabras. They're like, that's how it is. That's how they describe themselves. They're tough on the outside and soft on the inside. It is what it is.
These guys, I think were more like what vegetable? I think more like a cucumber, tough on the outside and tough on the inside.
Oh.
They're tough all the way around, and so that didn't last long. But the funny thing is that when I think back to all those foods that I asked them about, they were so foreign to me and I didn't know what they were. Now they're part of regular Jewish cuisine here in the United States.
Well,
everyone knows what a falafel is. Everybody knows what shawarma is now.
Well, I just find it interesting enough to think of like, well, what makes Jewish food Jewish food? Does it have to, like, if a Jewish person invents it and creates it, does that make it Jewish food? Like the guy who made Tafudi Cuties, the Jewish guy that made the Tafudi Cuties and all that stuff with tofu.
Mm-hmm.
Like would that be considered Jewish cuisine? If you look, actually, if anybody's interested, you look at the Tafudi. It's the Tafudi brand, the Tofutti Tafudi brand was made by a religious Jewish man who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, I think. He had, if you look on the box, there's a smiley face, but the smiley face has a yarmulke on it. They always do.
Well, I understand he did. He actually worked to the Rebbe for a bracha when he
Interesting.
came up with the recipe. Yeah. Mhm. So anyway, what else does I talk? Oh yeah. So when I remember when your father and I were in Israel, I like, I like to be adventurous as far
Oh
as
yeah.
food is concerned, and I like to eat different and strange things. So I ordered a Moroccan grill. That's
No,
livers,
it's Jerusalem.
Jerusalem grill. It's
It's
what
called a
it's the one
Jerusalem
that's
grill
it's the one that has
with all the
it's
hearts and liver and
chicken
chicken liver,
livers and
chicken hearts, chicken
spleen and heart.
spleen.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's called
yes,
Jerusalem
it's
grill.
sautéed and onions and garlic and poured on rice. And I ordered that, and your your father wouldn't sit next to me.
And it just was too much. He couldn't take it.
But then there was the Yemenite restaurant.
Oh, which Yemenite restaurant in Israel?
We went. Yosef took us to a Yemenite restaurant, and unfortunately, what I wanted, they didn't have. It was on the menu, and I just had to try it for the sake of just for the sake of coming back home and saying that I did.
What was it?
Uh, a
Bull
bull's
testicles.
script. Yes.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. I guessed it, and I knew it. I guessed it. I knew it. Well, I find it interesting where it's like I went to Israel and I was trying very hard to find kosher locusts. If anybody's
Ooh.
listening and you know to contact me through Facebook, just let me know if you find kosher locusts, because there's a small group of people in Israel that have the mafarish and have the ability to go ahead and check all like which locusts are kosher, and I would love to try some. Because that's
They
something that's
chef them.
well, no, you chef and just pop their head off. That's it.
Oh, okay. I was wondering.
You pop their head off and you eat them. That's it.
But you have to fry them first, don't you? So they get
You can eat them
crunchy.
plain. I don't know. I would be curious to see. I would try them out. Fry them or whatnot. Like I would love to just figure it. It's supposed to be a yellow locust. It's yellow locust, certain type. The wings are supposed to cover a certain part of the feet. It's a very like complicated like issue where certain ones are specifically the certain things.
Is it
And
anything like the blue-eyed cicadas last time we had them?
no, not like blue-eyed cicadas, which I haven't seen cicadas yet so far. I
Don't give
haven't.
any eye hearts, man. This is supposed to be the year.
It's been quiet. It's been really, really quiet. And
The
it's been
calm
getting pretty
before the
hot lately.
storm.
But yeah, no, I love to see if there could be like a Jewish cuisine when it comes to locusts, like certain way to make them and things like that. But I'd also want to see if like I learn like Gemara and Rambam and see if they talk about certain, I guess, foods that they make and how they make them, because there's this beer called Midas's Touch, I think by Dogfish Head. And what happened was that they found an ancient recipe for beer from Egypt, and they were able to duplicate it and copy it, and therefore create their own beer from that recipe from thousands of years ago. So I'd love to see if there could ever be an archaeologist or anybody who finds like ancient Jewish recipes. That would be neat.
Be interesting.
That'd
be interesting.
Yeah.
I've never had. Yeah, nothing I can think of. It'd be interesting if we could find something like that. Hey, maybe you can Google it.
I can Google it right now, but I don't think I'd find anything. It'll take me.
Ancient Jewish recipes. But then one of the I remember I was teaching kashrus one time at a Reform Hebrew school, and one of the kids came up to me before we were going to study. He knew we were going to study the unit. And before we studied the unit, he comes over to me and says, "My mother says we don't keep kosher because it's too fattening." And I said, "What's so fattening about fruits and vegetables?" And he was shocked. He had no idea that fruits and vegetables were kosher. A lot of people make the mistake of, when they think of kosher food, they think of, like we said, all the fattening, a lot of the fattening Ashkenazic foods, not really, realizing what kashrus really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking right now online, and that's where it's like they talk about Rambam's, diet. Rambam has a certain diet of certain foods to eat and like writes it all down, but that's more of like a diet, not necessarily like a recipe. And there's like,
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said something before that the only foods that are really truly, what you would say Jewish, are the foods that are directly connected to our religious rituals.
Yeah, well,
You might say, whereas I think most,
it's
I
our
think most,
culture.
I think,
The
I
religion
think,
more
I
is
think
a culture, if you think about it.
yeah, but I think Jewish food is not really Jewish. I think, it's for whatever countries we have migrated to, we adopt their living habits, their eating habits, rather. I remember, in fact, my first trip to Europe. No, my first trip to Europe. I remember we had a stopover in Munich. And to my surprise, I saw in a number of German restaurants, regular German people eating herring and sour cream, which
Yeah.
is something that I always thought of as being, distinctively Jewish. And it's not. Evidently, it's like it's North European.
But you know what's interesting, and this is the last piece because like we're running out of time. The one thing I can say is Jewish cuisine is kosher. No matter what it is, if it's kosher, that itself would be considered Jewish cuisine, in my opinion.
I guess I guess you would absolutely be
And
right.
that is time.
Yes, you want me to stop before I get into anything more controversial, don't you? Yes.
No, it's just I try to keep the listeners interested for 20 minutes, and then between 20
Are
25
we
minutes.
still on the air? Are we off?
No, we're on the air.
Okay.
we haven't turned off. But yeah, I try to keep the listeners engaged for a little bit, and then that's it. I don't want to go too far overboard because I think a lot of times listening to some podcasts are like an hour and a half long, unless they're really interesting. I'm listening to this one with like Zach Braff from Scrubs. That's like really interesting, but like other than that, if it's more than 25, 30 minutes, I lose interest. All right. Yeah. It's been all good. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thanks everyone for listening.
Hey, have a good Shabbos, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Eat your chicken soup made with feet.
Thank you for listening to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. Please like and share and find us on Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother Podcast. We are looking forward to hearing from you.